published on December 13, 2018, in the local source, the official newspaper for the Township of Springfield for the year 2019, and posted in the Annex Building on December 14, 2018. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Gentlemen, we have a roll call.
Mr. Stephen Hochstein.
Here.
Ms. Jody Cohen. Here. Mr. Daniel Poltrock is absent. Mr. Mark Cunningham.
Here.
Mr. David Schnurr is absent. Ms. Kara Greco. Here. Mr. Harris Laufer is absent. Vice Chair Greg Roth.
Here.
And Chairman Anthony Fonseca.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of October 2019.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Perfect. We have some resolutions. The first one is application 2019-11, Zachary Estrin, 57 Brook Street, Block 700, Lot 6. That was for a rear yard variance for a deck. Is there a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
And we have a roll call.
Ms. Cohen. Yes. Mr. Hochstein.
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham.
Yes.
Ms. Greco.
Yes.
Vice Chair Roth.
Yes.
And Chairman Fonseca.
I was not here.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Oh, that was the meeting.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. The next one is application 2019-21, Corey and Erica Falcon, 62 Irwin Street, Block 3402, Lot 11. That was a front yard, rear yard variances, and lot area variances for an addition. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
A roll call, please.
Mr. Hochstein.
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham.
Yes.
Ms. Cohen. Yes. Ms. Greco.
Yes.
And Vice Chair Roth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The last one is application 2019-20, New Jersey Table Tennis and Badminton Sports Center, LLC, at 10 Fadum Road, Block 3703, Lot 3. That was for a preliminary and final site plan, use variance and bulk variance. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
And a second, please.
I'll second.
And we have a roll call.
Mr. Hochstein.
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham.
Yes.
Ms. Cohen.
Yes.
Ms. Greco.
Yes.
And Vice Chair Roth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We have two applications tonight. One is being carried from last month. We're going to take the residential application first. That's application 2019-22, Mika and Andre Spiegel, 71 Gulf Oval, Block 1704, Lot 1. That's for a front yard variance for a fence. Please come forward.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. How are yourself?
Good. You're going to be sworn in?
Sure.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes.
Please state your name and address.
Micah Spiegel, 71 Gulf Oval.
Thank you.
Sure.
Please tell us what you'd like to do.
Sure. This is my first board meeting this month, actually, but it is the first one where I'm not the one keeping the minutes, so I'll try to talk evenly. So I'm looking at putting a fence in my backyard. I'm on a corner in Gulf Oval, and for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you do, but if you don't know, Gulf Oval is a very rarely traveled cul-de-sac. It's got an island in the middle, and the island is split into quadrants. Each quadrant is a property of the house. So because of that, the front yard and the side yard both have a curb. So my backyard has a curb on the side of it. So I'm looking to encircle the entire backyard with a fence. And the reasons for this is, A, for privacy purposes. We have two small children, and to have them in the backyard and play, we like to ensure that they're private, that nobody can interfere with their ability to play safely. Also for security purposes, we want that as well. And if we didn't have the fence within 30 feet, it would probably cut off a good third of the backyard behind our house. So that would expose a fair portion of the yard to pedestrians, to vehicles, and whatnot, so it would limit the amount of safety we have in the backyard. Also, we've promised a dog in the near future for the kids. So having as much of a space that's encircled with a fence as possible is ideal, as well as for safety purposes to have that in place. That's basically the reason why we're looking for that. And just to be clear, we're very aware of the concerns about height with regards to these variances. So we're applying for a 4-foot solid fence with a 1-foot lattice.
My question, this is your survey,
Yes, it is.
okay? So this is the end of your property.
That's correct.
Does this interfere with a sight line at all?
That's actually not the corner. That butts up against the next property. So that is actually, that point right there is the middle of the block.
So there's a home,
That's correct, and you can infer that it's the same length as mine.
So there's no street to make a right on.
I went to
correct.
look at that property, and I looked quickly, and I went to the street that started with the wrong G, and I couldn't imagine why you needed a variance. So it wasn't until I got back to my office that I had seen it, so I...
People
like to have-
confuse us with garden
I
oval
would have
all the
seen
time.
it. All right, so that wouldn't interfere with anything at that point.
Well, the fence where it's proposed, it looks like it's, how far off the property line are you proposing?
Whatever the legal requirement is, I forget if it's 7 or 10 off the curb, but wherever the legal requirement is, that's where we're going to put it.
All right, well, you look like you're proposing very close to the property line. The property line's probably about 10 feet off the curb.
So it'd be 10.
So, you know, you could have a sight line distance backing out, because you're backing out of your driveway, and you're more toward the forward of the car. You could, you know, I would suggest that we pull the fence back a few more feet off the property line, so you do have an improved
That's a
sight.
concern that I
Yeah.
saw by looking
agree.
at that.
Just for safety.
Well, yeah,
So
precisely.
whatever the township engineer thinks where it should be, I would get it staked out and have him check and make sure ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah. I think if you struck a line.
If 10 feet is generally the case, though, right?
Well,
Well, no,
you're
it's-
talking, I don't know where you're talking 10 feet from.
Curb.
Well,
No, that's not, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way. And in this case, again, for sightline, I would suggest you would be maybe, let's say, 20, to your purposes, 20 feet off the curb, 10 feet off the property line would be, definitely be clear of any sightline issue without putting a line on it and sketching it now.
Is there a sidewalk along the inside?
There is.
Excuse me, do you already have landscaping between the driveway and where the fence is proposed right now?
Yes.
Is it very mature? Is it affecting the sightline anyway right now?
No,
No, I
there
mean,
are,
like, I'm not trying to say.
no, there are arborvitae in place right there where we would put them, and we have no issues.
So you would put the fence
driveway.
behind the arborvitae's?
No, we're going to remove the arborvitae and put a more permanent replacement there, which would be the fence. It'd be shorter.
So I think
So
if the-
probably if you had the fence behind the line of arborvitae's after he took them out, that would probably be
Yeah,
safe to be on
agreed.
the sight line. So you need the fence behind the line where the trees are now, staked out. And then your sight line will probably be, I mean, again, I would probably have the township engineer look at it.
Wait a minute. The arborvitae's, are they here and up here? Or
Yes. So everywhere where you have X's on the,
you have arborvitae's?
correct, not on the rear anymore, but everywhere else.
I just want to be sure we're, okay. Yeah, it's.
So to be clear, where the arborvitae's end, right, that ideally is where we're looking at. So it would be, as you're backing out, we have the same exact site
it's his
as
garage line.
now, because where the end of the trees are, that's where the...
A natural fence has different guidelines than a structure that you
Sure,
put up.
of course.
So you can actually put, if I'm not mistaken, a shrub right on your property line, and there isn't an issue. But when it comes to a fence, and there is, I forgot if it's from the midpoint of the street, so many feet
Yes.
in is the determining spot where you have to be. So I would think that you'd probably need to check with the engineering department
Sure.
to find out specifically where that is, have it staked, and then have it looked at before you start erecting anything, because if it's in the wrong place,
They're gonna make you move.
you're gonna have it taken out, and
Sure.
you don't want to do that.
No,
I mean,
of course.
that would be, pretty silly and foolish.
Can I ask a question? What is like a reasonable distance from the curb at the street to where a driver would be able to back out and see? Maybe we can give a distance from the curb.
Yeah, I mean, a reasonable distance is the driver's eye would be, let's say, he should be at least 15 feet from the curb, the driver's eye should be 15 feet toward the driveway, the driver's eye, and be able to look, say, out, let's say, 200 feet, a clear distance, straight out, looking back and seeing what's in the road. So if it's what they call as a sight triangle, and in this case, backing out, you may want to have a 10 or 15, let's say a 15-foot sight triangle from the curb in, so you can back out and clearly see to your left and to your right.
Do you understand what he's explaining?
I know by sight triangle, yeah. It's usually coming from a curb, so that's why I'm a little confused at
I would
the
add,
point that I'm looking at.
There appears to be existing full vegetation and hedge along the driveway now and along the property line.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to screen this, leave that vegetation there and just place the fence behind that existing vegetation? Instead of trying to push it out for every foot, just leave it a few feet back, just behind the existing vegetation?
That's a good thought. These are not trees that really are going to last permanently, I think. I think they're a little, the arborvitae, they're not taproot, more like the ball root. So you get a good storm once in a while and we'll lose.
Yeah, I see they're kind of overgrown. But,
Yeah, you get a couple that you lose, so.
Again, the sight line, we would want that back. I think for discussion purposes, the fence should be set back at least 5 feet off the property line, basically behind where the existing fence line is. I think it'd be safe with sight lines. About 15 feet back from the curb line.
Does anybody else have any questions?
No, I think that makes sense, and you get a bigger yard and it's safe.
Is that subject to like the distance between 10 and 15 or whatever? Is that subject to like the engineer having a?
It's subject to what the rule states. So it's whatever the rule is. It's not a matter of whether we want to say 10, 12, 30, it's whatever it is. So
the
if it's
engineer
15
can lay
feet,
that
it's
out.
15 feet. You know, that's the
There's
way
no hard rule on backing out of the driveway, but you have to have good, safe
Right,
distance.
right. That's why I'm saying.
So my question is, the engineer be able to
Yes.
advise of that? Okay,
Yes,
that's
yes.
understood.
Helpful. No other further questions from the board at this time? Is the,
I think you need to clarify what the variances that they're getting. They talk about 30 feet. That's the setback to the building. They're
I
actually
don't think we
looking.
quite got there yet.
Huh?
I didn't think we quite got there. I want to ask the public.
Okay.
And then we can stipulate as to what it would be.
That's fine.
Okay. Is there anybody from the public who would like to be heard on this application? Okay, so, what Mr. Bergen was bringing up is, I think we can approve your application with a 4-foot high fence with a foot of lattice. You have to have the property staked first, and then have the engineering department look at it to make sure that it's in the proper place where you want to have it. I don't really have an issue with it being on the back of the property. It's really, the concern is over here. All right? So I think if we can do that, then we would be okay.
Okay,
Is that acceptable to you?
absolutely.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Can I ask, is there going to be a distance from the curb that we're going to
Well,
say?
it's subject to whatever that sight line has to
Again,
be.
at this point, I recommend
15 feet.
From the
So
curb.
so
Okay.
15 feet.
It's a fence.
From the curb.
He's not allowed to have a fence here at all. That's fine.
Or if you wanted to say, be a hard number, we could say 5 feet from the property line. I don't know the distance from the curb to the property line.
Right.
I know.
It might be 6
But a
feet.
hard
or-
number is.
That's why 15 sounds like it's better. It just makes it easier. We don't,
Yeah,
God-
you can measure.
God forbid it's short, somewhere it's a little narrower or something like that. So 15 feet from the curb.
Yes.
So that's my point, was with my question before, if I wasn't clear on it, is that, is it, and I'm sorry, I don't, you may be the engineer and I'm not sure.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm not the review engineer. For residential applications, it's Mr. Disco has done the
Right.
review for this, so it'll go back to him, but.
Okay.
What's your question?
So from the property owner standpoint, when I'm looking to put this in place, do I go with 15 or do I have the engineer kind of make?
We're suggesting 15.
Got it. Okay.
Not necessarily from your property line, from the curb.
From the curb, yeah.
There is a right of way that, you know, where the sidewalk and stuff is, you don't know.
Right.
So that's fine, but.
Right, so one variance is for allowing a 4-foot-high fence with a 1 foot of lattice, so it's a total of 5 feet high, and it's gonna be 15 feet from the curb, is what we're.
Yeah, and I would make one provision on that, that is checked and that is within the property. I'm sure that it is, but I just wanna
Sure.
see that fence ends up being within the property, and it should be about 5 feet from the property.
Yeah, we wanna make sure that you don't have to do it a second time.
Right, understood.
What's that?
And fence in the front.
Yes.
That's second variance.
Second variance is the fence in the front yard, which we're approving.
So it's 2 variances.
Yes, yes. Okay, are we set now? Yep. Okay, great. So, I would like a motion to approve application 2019-22 for Mika and Andrea Spiegel, 71 Gulf Oval, Block 1704, Lot 1, front yard variance. There are 2 variances. One is for the front yard, the second one is for the 4-foot solid fence with a foot of lattice, 15 feet off the curb on the side of the house.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
A second.
We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Hochstein?
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham?
Yes.
Ms. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Vice Chair Roth?
Yes.
And Chairman Fonseca?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Good luck.
Thanks very much, appreciate it.
Have a nice evening. Okay, the next application is 2013-19 Pop Realty, 25 Route 22 East, Block 3801, Lot 8. This is for an amended site plan use variance for drive-through, and this is a continuation from an October 2019 meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Erwin Schnitzer. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I just want to be clear as to what the applicant is seeking. The applicant is seeking a use variance for the Krispy Kreme location as a fast food operation, and the variances that may be required for the drive-through lane with the window that exists there. And at our last hearing, the board wanted some information regarding traffic in the location of the Krispy Kreme. I think the board was concerned because when Krispy Kreme was opened, it was a very busy traffic pattern. There was a lot of traffic there. We had Mr. Gary Dean, who's previously been sworn in, who did some traffic studies at the location, and I would ask that he present that information to the board at this time. Mr. Dean?
Still on drive-through.
Good evening, I understand I'm still under oath. As the board had requested and your engineer, I submitted a summary of traffic conditions that were personally observed at the site. We basically studied traffic during the weekday, morning rush hours, afternoon rush hours, and then on Saturday, generally between 10 and 1:30, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. For identification, our correspondence was forwarded to the board dated October 31st of this year, and it responds generally in point to Mr. Cangiano's review letter. But while I get into some of the description, what I'd like to do, and I have 3 videos that were not transmitted to the board, just because of time constraints. But what we did is, and you'll see, and hopefully everyone on the dais can see the television. Is that good? Okay. What I'm going to do is simultaneously run the video, which was flown with a drone, and you'll see in a moment. It was flown this morning. It was flown, I think it was Monday afternoon, and then it was flown on last Saturday. And we did so. So this is the site in question. Our staff who flew the drone was here was at the site at 6:53 in the morning. And you'll see roughly 40 minutes. I don't, hopefully my presentation doesn't take that long, but I have a video. I can leave copies with the board if you'd like. But what you see is literally the site, and just for orientation, you will see Route 22 to the upper right-hand corner of the, television screen. The southwest corner of the building is to the bottom of the television. And right now at 43 seconds into the video, you will see a car, a white vehicle at the southeast corner of the building, placing an order at the order station, and then once completed, that vehicle will then pull forward or to the north to the pickup window. So as this runs, and I can fast forward if the board would like, but it's not particularly exciting, but I will share with you a few numbers from our counts. And the honeymoon is over. Certainly, you heard me describe that at the last hearing, that I would not characterize Krispy Kreme as a particularly busy morning generator or the afternoon. Interestingly enough, Krispy Kreme was busiest on Saturday. And I'll just share a few numbers. In the morning, and if we were to tabulate the vehicles throughout the course of this video, we found in 1 hour 13 vehicles total. Basically, one every 4 minutes used the drive-through to the southern side of the building and the western side of the building. It is infrequently used. The site generated a total of 94 vehicles that we observed. 52 entered from Route 22 east and 42 exited. Presumably the balance of that were employees, and I mischaracterized the daycare center in the back. It's Kitty Academy, not Lightbridge. Those were probably staff who were parking or vehicles that for whatever reason exited out the Diamond Road. And I would characterize what you're seeing on the screen as is fairly representative. It is it's just not a busy site, and certainly not like anything I personally witnessed in August when the store first opened. As we get into the afternoon peak hour, and again, traffic engineers always talk about hours. That was 4:30 to 5:30, and 11 total vehicles used the drive-through. So it's about 1 every 6 minutes, very infrequent. Our busiest time for drive-through was on Saturday, which was 25 total vehicles. And if you want to see any one of those, I can certainly show you those videos. I don't know that I can speed it up necessarily. I don't think I have that capability. But it is in my opinion, a very low activity use. Now that one vehicle I described who placed his order, and we are now 3 minutes and 30 seconds into the video, he has moved forward or north to the pickup window, and as you'll see, and again, this is 7 o'clock in the morning, so we are at our peak hour, no other cars in line. Now a vehicle just entered and now proceeded to the left of the screen, going toward Kitty Academy. So no other vehicles in the queue, and one vehicle parked directly behind, or in the southeast corner, that I would assume is a store employee. The rest of the lot, as you'll see, is devoid of any parking. There are 3 vehicles further behind the building. Again, I suspect those are employee vehicles. We did attach to the correspondence as requested a copy of the NJDOT highway access permit that was issued. Reviewing the traffic counts, we are well within the trip limits or the traffic generation limits that were included in the DOT permit. You'll hear from Mr. Titus soon as to the parking spaces, how they were shifted on the site during construction, and some of the other plan changes that have occurred, so I will leave that to him. You will see the traffic patterns on the site and the construction of the drive-through lane, if it were to ever fill up, would block these 25 or so parking spaces. So the concept as we've developed is to remove the 13 spaces directly behind the building and allow for the spaces where we have a pointing, so forgive me, this is more towards the southwesterly corner of the building where there's a crosshatched striped area. That lane at the sort of the tip of the parking spaces would be restriped essentially in the manner that you see on the video for the drive-through stacking lane, and allow vehicles to then wrap around the building as they do today. But that would in turn allow access to those parking spaces if there was ever a queue. And I would recommend that, you know, even though we don't need it for Krispy Kreme, obviously these types of approvals, there may be other tenants, though I doubt it. We don't want that ever to become a situation where people can't get out of the parking spaces. We can stack somewhere between 10 and 11 cars in the drive-through lane, if we were to stripe it per our recommendation. And that exceeds what I would characterize as the industry standard of 8, but also what DOT recommends as minimum stacking for drive-through. Mr. Cangiano's office had recommended that by creating what in essence will be a one-way parking aisle, that the 12 or 13 spaces in the next aisle should be angled, so that people understand when they leave, they don't back out and sort of go in an opposite direction to the drive-through lane. What happens when we make spaces angled, we lose some, or there's potential. I think if we held that angle to maybe 75 degrees, we would be able to keep, I'm just not sure about the very westerly one near the main access aisle, on an angle, whether it will fit. So I'll leave that to the board and Mr. Cangiano as to whether that, you know, the trade-offs are worth it. And we have other witnesses to discuss some of the other items that were raised in the review report. So what we've concluded by looking at it is obviously the site is operating. We are not anywhere close to the same degree of activity that I observed, and again, that was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I believe, in August when I visited. It was quite busy then with cars stacking up in the lane. So here we are at 7 minutes and 50 seconds into the video, and we now have our second vehicle approaching. So this is at roughly 7:07, 7:10 in the morning. Certainly not that busy. And if you'd like, and I'll just throw it out to the board, if you want me to fast forward a little bit, we can jump ahead to maybe later in the morning. I can just let the video run. But maybe you want to hear from other witnesses. I'll let this run, and then I'll switch to the other piece. Just, you know, out of the corner of your eye, you can continue to watch it. But what I wanted to do is show you what we see from within the field. And again, I would characterize it as not something that's overly problematic or operationally creating any issues in terms of circulation on the site, but for that lane the way it was striped. And if there are any specific questions, certainly.
What day is this now?
This was done, it was on the title card, it was done this morning.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought I saw November 13th. I didn't know whether that was showing what today's date was, or that was actually, that was live this morning.
And yesterday was too windy and we had some bad weather, so today it was nice, clear, a little cool, but
We need to have this entered as an exhibit.
I'll leave you with the whole thumb drive so you have all 3 video clips from, and the dates. Why don't I do this? I think I got the dates right now. I'm turning off the video now from the morning peak. I just want to get the dates. Saturday, the PM was November 11th, so that was Monday. And again, now that I called it up, so it's later in the day, roughly, let's see, our peak hour was 4:30 to 5:30, so we're generally in that time frame. We now have more vehicles parked on site. Nobody's in the drive-through. We can see from this perspective both driveways. Excuse me, pilot. And we're just, it's the same general perspective, watching the ins and outs. And then finally, the Saturday.
When the Sky Zone is open?
Sky Zone during the PM Saturday. Let me get that title card. Oops. November 9th. So, and
Okay, so now you have cars in the,
I think this one, and I actually flew this myself, this one is busier. I mean, Sky Zone was open,
That's
Kitty
what I
Academy is closed, and we had the same perspective, so you are continuing to look north, slightly northwest. Dunkin' Donuts is to the far right-hand corner, and we're focusing now on the drive-through. So unlike, believe it or not, morning peak hour, here we are Saturday at, I was here at about 1:45, because that was when it was the busiest, and just so the board is aware, when we do our counts, when we sent the staff out, we count in 15-minute blocks. So I found the 15 minutes when traffic was the busiest. And I think it's, people are picking up donuts, either relatives or, kids for soccer games, things of that nature. And certainly the drive-through was busier. I'd say it was twice as busy as it was during the weekday. I didn't see any stacking, that was too excessive, blocking parking spaces, but you can certainly see the potential if another car were to come in. And I would like to show you, just because I know there was a question at some point. I broke it, I'm sorry. There was a point where questions were, hey, what's the parking, the overall parking on the site? How is that working? And I'm sorry, I don't know what just happened. But what I wanted to do is show you that footage, because I basically took a lap around the whole site.
that's what I want to see.
We'll try it a different way. It was toward the end, and it was the total duration, it was over an hour. So, but I will get there. Now, for example, this truck, you'll see it was a U-Haul truck. I don't know what the reason was, but he must have been in that drive-thru for 5 minutes. And I don't know if there's an operational issue inside, or he just placed a very large order. But I am doing my best, so forgive me. He finally moved up 7 minutes into the video. But fortunately, you'll see no other vehicles. You'll see the parking lot. I wanted to show you this. So the video just panned to the left. And this may be where I took a lap around the property. You'll see the parking at Sky Zone is full. There are a few spots closer to the Krispy Kreme building and the restaurant building. Maybe a half a dozen, 7 spaces. I think there's another handicap. And then, of course, all the parking in the very northeast corner is vacant.
What is the parking behind the Kinko's considered toward the Kinko's or toward the Sky Zone?
It's not designated for any tenant. It's, I believe, technically, and I better let Mr. Titus testify to this, I believe it's technically on the Kinko's lot.
Yeah.
But if you're a customer to Sky Zone or any of the other stores, you don't know whose it is. It just
No,
looks
but I'm
like-
asking, from all the pictures I've seen, there's only been like 2 cars back there. I'm just curious who, because obviously nobody from Kinko's is parking back there.
Correct.
Those are probably employee,
I was just a little bit unclear, and if you could just explain it, since there are cars there now,
there's nothing.
how this would operate. You would get rid of the parking. Correct. Here, and just one-way. Correct. Okay. So we would lose perpendicular parking and instead create the drive-through lane. Drive-through lanes are sometimes called dynamic removable parking, in that we can accommodate customers in that lane instead of having them park and walk in. The difference is about 2 vehicles. We have 13 striped spaces behind the building, and our drive-through lane would accommodate about 11. So we're close. We're just doing it in a little different, more efficient manner.
So
I believe this is the video portion where I went around the entire site. So I've now moved the drone and the footage to look due west. You can see the front of the building obviously is tons of vacant parking. Of course, the other restaurants haven't opened. And figuring this may be of interest to the board, I call it lap around, but you can, now I'm sort of focusing on, and we are 23 minutes and 30 seconds into the video. I'm now in between the Kinko's building and the Krispy Kreme building. You're now looking at the corridor of parking between Kinko's and Sky Zone. We are approaching the 24-hour fitness parking lot, and the video has rotated counterclockwise and is proceeding south along the access aisle between the fitness and the back or west side of Sky Zone. And I do pivot, so hopefully you'll be able to see. There's still some unfinished, unstriped parking spaces. I think that is to the west of the Sky Zone, and then we have 20, 25 spaces around Kiddie Academy, and now you're looking at the play area with that figure 8, and the video is now rotating, but it's now looking somewhat north. That's the end of Dynam Road.
So those cars parked on the street in the corner there are going to Sky Zone?
I assume that's the case, yes. I don't know that to be the fact, but given that there's really no other reason to park there, that probably is the case. Well, it's not for any one in particular. I forget, and I'll defer to Mr. Titus.
You'd have to
I know
walk
there's
all the way around the building. That's
some striping or legend or text that has been put on those, I believe, but you'll hear more about that. So this is where I paused the video at 24 minutes and 43 seconds, is looking due north from Diamond Road at the very southern end of where Kiddie Academy is, with vehicles parked on both sides of that aisle on the easterly side of the building.
Saturday. That's what we expect. So people don't like to park on the back side of the building for Sky Zone because there's no back entrance to Sky Zone, correct?
I don't know the answer to that. We'll have a witness that can get there. So in any event, I'll continue to let this run, and that it was Saturday and that was the busiest. And then if there's other questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you shift the parking for the drive-through right next to the building,
Yes.
how do they come around and make that turn? Are they going to have to be 10 feet, 8 feet off of the, is there going to be enough to put some parallel parking along the building, so you, maybe for employees or something, so you can get it away from the building? It doesn't look like they can make that turn.
Sure. I'll do my best to describe it, and the video should be stationary. On the site plan, if you happen to have copies of it, there were 2 asphalt loading ramps that were put in at 2 of the parking spaces, and it allows a vehicle to be parked, but it's easier to hand truck and wheel materials into the rear door entrances. My recommendation was, we don't want to tear those ramps out, we still want to have access to them. So the idea is, because these stalls are 18 feet long, half of it, 9 feet, would be the drive-through lane, and the other, if it's exactly half, Mr. Titus has a dimension that those ramps are, say, 8 feet, then we'll have a 10-foot lane. But the idea is, those ramps would continue to be available. That may have been the end, that's why I couldn't fast forward it. So I'll just please pause. So the idea is, instead of perpendicular head into the building, we would in essence create the parallel configuration, and the entire drive-through lane that you see would just be moved closer to the building. But at the very southeast corner of the building, you'll see this cross-hatched door area. That will still allow vehicles to make the turn to get in around that corner of the building. It's not right up against the building.
So if you're taking half of the 18 feet, you still have 9 feet to the building.
Yes.
Couldn't you do some parallel spots to the building if you pick up some spots there?
We could. My thought was, in the event that there's loading, and loading takes 20 minutes, that truck can pull in, occupy what's in between, for example, the ramps, and it lets the drive-through keep running. So if someone parks there, they better be employees, because otherwise they're.
Well, maybe that's what you do. Maybe
Employee
you put
only.
employee-only parking and you have some spots that.
We can certainly
you
do
pick
that, and I'd have to, let's see, we could fit one, it's a little more, so they're parallels, but I'll say one. We could probably fit 3 parallel spots.
Every spot is important on the site.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's not, certainly a good suggestion. I wanted it for loading, but you'll see that crosshatch striped areas and very little parking is going on the west. We have areas that don't affect circulation that can be used for tailgate loading. But we're certainly open to that suggestion. We would just need to amend the plan that has been presented. So, in answer to the question, where we have the landscaped island in the very southwest corner, that the vehicles, and we showed striping as to how they would be directed to enter the drive-through lane and still allow traffic to come through the aisle. But we did try to effectuate that through striping and if need be, an additional directional sign. I confess I don't recall exactly what was done on the plan.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3 spots. Employee parking's 3 spots.
That'll work. And they'll open up, not dissimilar to parking right outside here where they're parking against the left side of the curb so that they're exiting their vehicles right up alongside that sidewalk area that's directly behind the building.
That's what I'm saying, you don't lose another spot.
Yeah, no, I'll leave this. Further questions?
Does anybody have any further questions?
Line up the traffic.
Is there anybody from the
I
public?
do.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So I'm just trying to understand what happens with the vehicles driving to Sky Zone and the vehicles coming in for this building.
Sure.
So can you just explain with the two driveways that I see right now, what's being proposed?
There's one driveway. We're not proposing any, I'll say, physical construction changes on the site at all. Hopefully it works. No, sorry. There is a corridor, if you will, a driveway, and it jumps off the page, so I'll do my best to point. I'm now pointing generally opposite the big U-turn to go from east to west 22 is the site entrance. That site entrance splits and it allows access to the northern double row of parking. It then continues as a single aisle to the rear, the southwest corner of the building, where we have another, call it an intersection, and either a Krispy Kreme and drive-through traffic turns left and then comes into the drive-through lane, and and Kitty Academy traffic continues south. Maybe I can show you on the video if it's not.
No,
It's backwards when you're, there you go.
I think I went a little. No.
No, that's the.
Yeah, I went a little too far.
It's right below you there.
Yeah. Okay. So this is now from the perspective looking due west at over the top of the new building where Krispy Kreme is at the bottom of the screen. And just again for reference, I'm at 23 minutes and 25 seconds. I'm pointing, there's a silver car entering the site driveway from Route 22. This, almost you can see the corridor or aisle that is in between the Kinko's building further west and the subject building, and it's right on. So that's the driveway that goes all the way, and you can see Sky Zone. Hopefully you can. The sign is here.
So drive-through traffic circulates counterclockwise, and Sky Zone traffic continues to the south or left of the street.
Okay, and so I see, is there a proposed stop sign on the Kinko's site now for traffic that comes in there?
That is a good question. I don't know what the site plans show.
Okay, I guess I'll wait for the
We have
engineer.
not made, to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe that intersection, if you will, between the northern side of Sky Zone and the aisle leading to Sky Zone, I don't think that had any changes, but we need to hear from Mr. Titus on that.
Right, because they are proposing shared parking with those spaces in the Kinko site now.
Well, they will function as shared spaces, and there are ownership, and I'm not trying to be cute, there are common ownership interests between this property owner, Kinko's, and 24-Hour Fitness that have allowed a variety of cross easements, and I know Mr. Schnitzer, I believe, submitted to board council.
I can advise the board. Pop Realty, it was previously to Gagliardi, Paul and Barbara Gagliardi. And then they assigned the lease to Pop Realty, has had control of that property from 1984, and it goes through to 2035. Paul demolished what the existing building was and built a new building and built a parking lot in front and in back at Kinko's, and put the parking where he felt it should be. He has control of that. Pop Realty does have control of that, and they also have the right of first refusal to purchase the property if the owner of the property ever wants to sell it. So they have it pretty well tied up, and he can put the parking the way it meets the entity, he can put it wherever he wants. That's it. That's-
So I think that one of the questions was, if somebody's parking over by the Kinko's, somebody's coming off of Route 22 and they want to go into the Carvel, the Moe's, how safe is that?
Most of the parking, I think, on the Kinko's building is in front of it.
No, but if somebody comes on this parking is full in front because of all the other restaurants being open. They park up by Kinko's.
Okay.
There's no crosswalk to walk across,
And they want to get the Krispy Kreme?
or to Moe's or anything that's over there.
Somebody's coming 50 miles an hour off the highway, and somebody's crossing the street there, how safe is that?
Very
Well, when people cross a public street or a driveway, I do expect them to look where they're going. In terms of site visibility, there's nothing hidden. This is open and clear sight lines. You are correct in that there is not a crosswalk, and part of it is you'll see, and I'm pointing, but this is on the Kinko's lot to the west, these islands that separate the access aisle from the Kinko's parking. They're filled with stone. So we don't have, the safety relative. To me, it's less safe for someone to step on an unstable surface than it is to look both ways and cross the street on pavement. However, what we can do, and you'll see there's a cross-hatched area, certainly adding a crosswalk. What I want to look at is there's some ornamental stuff in the way, and I forget what that stuff is, bollards, maybe a small retaining wall or some kind of decorative feature that wraps around that radius. I want to make sure and look at it, and I'm ill-prepared tonight. I don't know if there's a way to get that sort of crosswalk, from Kinko's. The only other place we could do it is at the southwest corner, in as much as there's a sidewalk that runs along the westerly side of the building. And that would allow customers in the southeast corner of Kinko's a delineated, and they can look all the way up the aisle. That might be the better place to do it. But if I park up here, I can walk across the street, no different than people walking to and from parking spaces.
But the mobility of its traffic coming off the highway is a little bit faster than backing out of a parking space or maneuvering within the parking lot constraints.
I'd agree. I think if someone pulls in and I'll say this, the northern parking area is full. If we go back to the video, we have that huge parking field on the eastern side of the building that was empty. So I think as people, enter looking for Moe's, looking for Krispy Kreme, oops, I can't find parking. Oh, here's a field. And then they start to circulate around the building. And this is where the thought of making sure we do have some signs that are proposed, do not enter, one ways, etc. We get them back into behind the building. And at that point, last resort, what you'll see, this is angled parking on the easterly side of Kinko's, then they're bucking traffic that way. So I can't tell you, no one will ever park in Kinko's and want to walk over. I just think that's probably fairly remote, but we can add, we can certainly add some striping and enhance that.
Yeah, because-
Just where you decide to put it.
Is there anything you could do to prevent pedestrians from crossing in the first, 30 or 40 feet off the highway that they would force them where
Cross farther back.
further back?
Pedestrian
So it's
control.
safer?
Yeah, I think, if I'm hearing correctly, a decorative fence, a rail, something to, yeah.
Some sort of pedestrian
So
control.
if they want to cross, it's farther down and they're
Right,
not going to be.
let's get them down here. I
Yeah.
mean,
How about perhaps a speed bump or two along that? That would definitely slow it down also.
I've not seen anybody really go through there quickly.
I don't know whether they would or not, I'm just throwing it out there.
It's one of those, if, we have ownership interest, if it becomes a problem, that's a good solution. The one challenge of speed humps is what it does to stormwater. We have to make sure we're not creating a puddle in front of the speed hump. And unfortunately, it's not on the picture. I don't know where we have our storm inlets to capture that.
I think having somebody hit by a car and then solving it afterwards, when we could probably think about it now and maybe make it safer, would probably be something to think about.
Well, I like to have answers to problems should they arise. I'm not necessarily wanting to solve things that haven't manifested themselves yet. So I always like to have that remedy available. I'm just not sure we're there yet, but I mean, certainly you have, after Mr. Gagliardi, you have commitment from the applicant that he wants it to be safe.
Sure.
And for liability reasons, it's in his best interest.
Excuse me, Chairman? I wanted to add something.
Certainly.
So we looked at this and we had suggested, I don't know why that's striped there, but we had suggested that be closed off. Should this get approved, we suggest that whole island there between the Kinko's and the our site be that curb, so there's no cross movement of vehicles. That's why I think that was why they had striped it. But I think that should be a full curb as well. I think it should be planted or in some way
Fence.
A real deterrent from allowing
Someone
something to come through there.
I think
I
there's-
agree.
the cars are coming off too fast, and it's too short of a limited sight distance for anyone to want a pedestrian to want for us to want a pedestrian to cross there. And maybe if they were going to cross, maybe a crosswalk toward the rear of the building. But our recommendation was to close that and curb that driveway or that island that's partially curved there between the Kinko's and this site. Because I don't think the four-way movement is a little too much movement there. So closing that permanently with a curb and planting it to deter the pedestrians, it'll stop any car movement and it'll deter the pedestrians as well. So that would be our recommendation, to close, make sure that's permanently closed with a curb, and then plant it.
In consulting with the applicant, obviously we want to have safe pedestrian flow. I think, subject to working with your professionals, I'm not sure closing the curb prevents somebody from ever stepping over it, right? We've all seen.
No, we need a fence or
Well,
something.
I think a nice, call it a 4-foot aluminum decorative fence that, not chain link, something garbage, that literally wraps all the way around these parking spaces, I think would achieve what you're after.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And then a crosswalk at the end,
And a crosswalk at the end.
right to your sidewalk.
And then it'll lead right to the sidewalk at that southwestern corner of the building. That's a good suggestion, and it can be done tomorrow before we get another free second.
Doesn't that result now in a parking variance? Isn't there, so there was correct me for the history, right? There was a variance for parking, because they were deficient. And then in this new proposal, from what I'm understanding, in order to continue with the same amount of spaces, they were making up for it by sharing on lot 7. So if we're putting up a barrier to basically say, no, this is not shared parking, you cannot cross over because that's a safety hazard, do we result in a bigger parking deficiency? Am I incorrect?
We're not saying they can't park there. I think if I understood the question from the board is,
Parking there for this space,
They
you're
can park-
asking them to walk over.
we're asking them to walk over in a place where it's safe to do so. If they have to park and want to come to this building, we want it to be annoying, quite frankly, and safer, so that they're doing so 100 feet into the site and staying on the sidewalk instead of walking across the main entrance. But if someone wishes to park on the Kinko's lot because it's empty on Saturday, I think we all want to encourage that shared parking. We just want to, I hate to use the word, but corral we want to direct the pedestrians to a preferred location that the board discussed. As to the question, I don't remember whether a parking variance was granted or not.
For the original, for the Sky Zone,
Yeah,
yes.
I think there was.
Now, if you roll back, I mean, that whole lot on this side of the building is empty. So, you know,
The east
obviously,
side.
the only thing that's open is the Krispy Kreme, so you're getting 3 or 4 other restaurants.
Correct.
So that's gonna fill up first before they go to the other side,
What do you think?
well, you would hope.
19 or 20 spaces on that eastern side of the building. And that's my expectation, is that as a customer enters from Route 22, looks at Moe's, and I forget the other tenants, but heads down towards Krispy Kreme, oops, no parking, here's a big empty field right in front.
I would agree with that.
But I would also say that if somebody is going to the second or third or fourth time, knowing that it's possibly full, they may just pull in the Kinko's and want to go the shortest route because people are lazy and they want to just go the shortest route to the door.
Well, that's what we need to do with the fence, so I agree with that.
Right.
Sorry. Am I missing something? They are proposing for 22 to be lot 7. So, okay. I absolutely not, because then you would be telling people that they need to
And it's not part
to
of
walk in the middle of someone flying off 22 to Sky Zone.
sort of. No, it's not.
That's the drone flew around the other side of the building, it's right there. The picture is all straight.
Well, it doesn't happen, it's under. Nobody says how it is for parking.
I understand, I'm just saying, it's just,
So I think it's a question of pedestrian control. We want to be realistic.
right. Okay.
Do you have something you want to say?
No, I have no other questions.
And when last meeting, we had asked you to show possibly graphically how the parking is shared among different variants. Is that something the engineers got?
Yes.
That's Mr. Titus, okay.
Are there any more questions for Mr. Dean?
I have one question. So the aerial, can you leave that up, Mr. Dean?
Oh, sorry, yeah, yep.
So while we're talking about Sky Zone, and I mean, you can tell that the parking lot is much more crowded when it's the most active. I don't know if you did any other observations on days where Sky Zone was particularly crowded, but it seems like it has the most impact on the parking in general, the shared parking especially. And so I just wanted to ask a question of you, if you looked at it at all. But the loss of the 13 spaces, which are being utilized right now, and the lack of 3 tenants being active right now in the front of the building, do you think the parking at the front of the building is going to be sufficient for the 3 additional tenants plus the vacant space?
The short answer is yes, I do believe that, with some caveats, and that is obviously, and I think one is Moe's Pizza. Is that pizza? And is there another one, or sushi? Sushi. So, one of the reasons that I was sort of trying to appeal to the board last time is that we just don't know. By letting them open, we'd be able to see, but I respect the fact that, you know, then the cows are out of the barn. So a sushi restaurant, my expectation would be, it would be busier at night. Moe's should be a lunchtime use. Pizzas, maybe some lunch, or probably busier at dinner time. So Sky Zone, this is peak time for Sky Zone. It's noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, kids are in there, it's very busy, and you saw as I took the lap, it's definitely crowded near their entrance, not so much on the other side.
Teenagers.
I'm looking at this, and as the video moved a little bit more to the north, you know, we have the 20 spaces on the eastern side and all of the spaces up front. Krispy Kreme, notwithstanding what's going on with the drive-through, just isn't all that busy. So I'm looking at 20, 30, 35, and I can't even see the front of the building. I was trying to get to the front on the video. I'm looking at 35 or so spaces that are, I'll call restaurant spaces, and I do think that is enough. The
Are you talking
caveat,
about in the front of the building?
yes, I'm trying to get to that.
In the front of the building, there's,
There you go.
Mr. Titus,
in the front of the building, as you pull into face the stores, there are 10 spots and 2 handicap spots. Facing Route 22, there's 16 spots.
So that's 8 and 16, 24. 11, so you have 19, 9 and 8, 17, that's 36, 36 and 12, 50 spots. Plus,
48.
less the 2 handicaps, you have 48 spots.
So, yeah, and I was using 40 as a rough number, assuming that, you know, there's a few Krispy Kreme customers, as we see in the video. So, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up front, 6, sorry. And then 1, 2, 3 on the side that I assume some of these have to be customers. So out of 50 spaces, to answer the question, that's why I think with each store needing roughly 14, 13 spaces, we're in that.
What is the requirement for each store based on its occupancy, square footage versus spaces?
Based on restaurants, it is 1 per 2.5 seats, inclusive of counter and waiting areas. And in this case, they provided that it would generate 249 seats, including the vacant tenancy, which would be a requirement of 100 spaces for all the if there are restaurant tenants in the front.
Is there an addition for employees?
That's it's just 1.2
Okay.
for 2.5.
So that building is supposed to have 100 spaces.
Yes, and
And-
it's shared with the Sky Zone site, but that's why I bring it up, because right now Sky Zone's parking right up to where a lot of the customers might park for the restaurants in the front, and it looks like it's a pretty popular place for Sky Zone to park. And I think if you take out the 13 spaces in the back, you're going to start to see some issues maybe creep up to the front of the building.
There are a couple of things I might suggest that I don't think have been featured on the plans, and hopefully you can see the cursor. We have the whole northerly facade of Sky Zone, and then the row of shared parking between Kinko's and Sky Zone. A simple directional sign on the corner of the building, it doesn't have to be enormous, that says additional parking for Sky Zone is going to help some people. They'll just understand, you know, it is a longer walk, and maybe what you'll see is a parent will drop their children off at the front door, recirculate, and then go park the car and walk in. So, you know, by encouraging that corridor, and I'm referring to the corridor row of parking between Kinko's and Sky Zone, that would relieve some pressure on the main parking area. You know, what goes along the western or easterly side of Kinko's in the angled spots, I wouldn't recommend doing anything with that. We want those tenants, and again, I don't recall the tenants in there, but we want them to have sufficient parking to augment whatever's up front. But I mean, I look at this, and granted, we have 1 out of 4 restaurants open, but the majority of the parking up front is empty. And this was
Well, you don't have three, you don't.
No, I understand.
You only have one
I
tenant
have one
in there.
tenant
And it's
that,
a drive-through,
that
so.
takes 6 and multiply that by 4.
Well, there's parking happening in the back too, which might be employees of the restaurants, correct?
And I
There's
suspect
6 or
that's-
7 spaces being taken up back there as well.
I'm not so sure of that, because the ones on the western end, let me back up a little bit, those restaurants aren't open. So I'm not exactly sure,
Sky Zone parking?
I'm not sure who that is.
It's difficult to tell, but it's being utilized, so
Correct.
you have to imagine that portion of the parking lot is much more popular than the other portion and behind the Sky Zone
No
building
question.
you
No
directed.
Because the entrance is in front, so I was thinking also the whole back of the building where you're gonna stretch for parking, that's gonna share for 24-hour fitness, there is no back entrance to Sky Zone. There's not a chance that anybody who's going to Sky Zone is gonna park in that back end.
No one does. They circle around until they find the spot on this side so they could walk right
Counting all
in.
that parking on the back, but there's no entrance to get into the facility, which is the heart of that building.
I don't disagree. People
If there was a
are,
back entrance, then you could see people parking back there, no problem. Then that parking would be utilized and you would take away a lot of the congestion on this side of the building.
I don't know enough about their interior layout, but we
I
have
don't
a
know,
witness.
I've never been inside, so I don't.
We have a witness that can, I think, get into more
That's
detail.
But I do think that marking the side of the building that's behind Kinko's as additional Sky Zone parking may help alleviate it, because I think if I was coming in there, I would be automatically assuming that that's property does not belong to Sky Zone, therefore I'm probably not going to park there. But if there was some sort of signage as you come in to see, okay, I can park, if it's packed back here, I can come back and park.
That's why I had recommended here a pointing. This is at 23 minutes and 34 seconds into the video. At the lower left-hand corner of this exhibit is the corner of Sky Zone.
Right.
Kinko's is the big building in the middle of the exhibit. Somewhere, so that as someone pulls in with a Sky Zone logo, so that it looks official, additional parking, that's going to help direct them, and that's why I recommend it. I mean, it doesn't have to be billboard size. It could be a simple 6 square foot or 10 square foot innocuous sign. But I think that would help make better use, and there's sidewalk along that facade of the building. You know, here's another, I'm going to just quick guess, at least 20 or so, 25 spaces that are just empty. I will admit that area of Sky Zone is crowded, but I think it's because people don't realize there's all this empty parking
And
elsewhere.
as I said, we saw at the flyover, there's people parking on the street, in the
Right.
corner of the street there.
Right.
Because it's closer to the entrance.
I agree. People,
We're lazy.
if they're lazy, they go to the gym, they want to park at the door.
May I make a suggestion? The applicant hasn't testified to what was approved last time and the amount of parking variance that was approved under the prior approval. And they had an approval of 251 parking spaces from the 2015 approval. I think the board should hear what was approved, a little bit of history on what was approved and what the configuration was and what is being proposed today, to see at least what the difference is. And I think you have a little bit more, better feel of the application. And I think we're looking at it, they had an approval. They had an approval for a certain amount of parking spaces. They deviated from that approval. Besides the use, the configuration and the use of the stalls have deviated, and that's why they're here today. So I think they should present the board, go back to 2015, what the prior approval was, let us know what that was approved for in the configuration, and then let us know what they're proposing today, what the difference is. And I mean, it seems like we don't have a good, clear history of how we got here.
Before we get to that, could I just, Mr. Gagliardi had been sworn in the last time, and he mentioned that the parking that you see, that is used by parking in the middle.
I'm sorry, just for the,
Gary Gagliardi, he was sworn.
Gary Gagliotti,
and your address?
2 Jason Road, Greenbrook, New Jersey.
Thank you, and you're still under oath?
Yes. Right now, as it stands, all the operations that are up and running now, all the employees are parking wherever they want. So as many employees as we have at Sky Zone, Kitty Academy, and all the restaurant uses, they're all parking in the front. So what we're suggesting we do is, we'll have somebody out there, we're gonna start having Kitty Academy, employees of Sky Zone, employees of Kitty Academy, all park in the spaces that you guys feel that aren't gonna be utilized properly in the back of the building.
Backside of the building?
Yes.
So you're gonna finish the backside of the building?
Yes, we plan on doing that right away. And we have a lot of parking back there that's not being utilized, and all the employees, we really haven't, gone out there and policed it and made sure of it, but all of Kitty Academy's teachers, aides, employees of Sky Zone, employees of Krispy Kreme, they're all taking the prime spots. So, we're gonna have them park utilize the others parking behind the building. So all sidewalk, they'll be able to walk on the sidewalk and everything else to get to their place of employment, but we just don't want them taking the best spots. Well, we haven't, at this point in time, we haven't had an issue. We don't think we're gonna have an issue, but we haven't had an issue with that, but we're gonna start in the future to make that
Because you
happen.
saw a video on a Saturday,
Yes.
that lot is
Yeah,
full for the
yeah.
Sky Zone.
But like I said, whatever employees are on the site, those cars, a portion of those cars are for the employees also.
Okay.
If I may, just to be clear,
Sure.
if you can describe more specifically where you're going to put the employee parking, so the record is
Okay.
clear?
It's going to be behind Sky Zone and Kitty Academy, in the rear of the building. We have a lot of parking, and it's not being utilized now because, like I said, the employees are all parking in the other lot.
So the parking adjacent to Lot 6?
Yes. And I don't know what that number of cars is, but it's probably substantial because I don't know how many teachers or aides are in Kitty Academy. I don't know how many employees Sky Zone has at one
about
particular
60 spots
time.
back.
Yeah, so it'll alleviate a lot of that parking.
I think what Mr. Caggiano brought up is good. If I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I am, when this was approved in 2015, it was a freestanding A restaurant. It wasn't a multiple tenant restaurant, the
It
building.
was the rest,
It was just,
13,000.
right, so it was one restaurant, and I think the spaces were kind of predicated based on that specific use at the time. Now we fast forward 4 years, the building is roughly the same, maybe plus or minus somewhat, but now there's 4 tenants, 4 different types of restaurants. And that could definitely have an impact on the parking, so maybe we should
We had Mr.
go back to that.
Mr. Titus, I think, will explain.
Okay.
What the original,
Before we move on to Mr. Titus, is there anybody in the audience that would have any questions of the traffic person? Thank you.
Mr. Titus, you've been sworn in at the last meeting, and you're still under oath. Could you explain to the board what the original approval was back in, I think the original approval was back even earlier. It was decided on December 17, 2013, memorialized on January 21st, 2014. The resolution was.
The original approval, it was the back building that contained Sky Zone, and we were gonna retrofit that building. We were gonna use the existing building as it was.
I thought it was a Burlington coat
We
factory.
discussed Burlington Coat Factory.
Yeah, I never heard of Sky Zone up until recently.
We were gonna use the existing building as it was and fix it. We weren't gonna tear it down and put it in the building. And then in the front was a building that was the same size as what's there now. The area of the building that was approved the first time was the same size. The difference with it was
Excuse me, what size was that?
13,500.
Okay,
13,500 square feet.
okay.
The difference was the entrance and the exit were both at this, on the westerly side of the property. But when we went to the DOT to get approval on that, they were worried that we were going to short circuit across the center island. There's a U-turn in the center island there. And they were worried that the traffic would circulate. So they had us split it up and put the entrance on the west side and the exit on the east side, which is the configuration, and that's what the DOT required. But the entrance also came out into the site and then swung back. And we were able to convince them that we had control over lot 7, and we could slide the entrance this way, or I don't want to say this way, I want to say to the west, which freed up some area over here to create some additional parking. So we took advantage of that and slid it over. So the difference between what's here now and the original approval in 2013 is the building's completely demolished and rebuilt. And this building is the same building that was proposed in size, square footage, 13,500, which slid a little bit to the west to give us some additional parking to the east.
And how about the parking that was originally approved?
I don't recall that number of spaces. And then what I'm showing here is the Miller, what this is it's the striping and signing plan with some of the previous layouts superimposed on it. And I think we better get this in as an exhibit if they don't have it.
Okay, I don't know.
Well, that's an exhibit,
Were there
so now we have another exhibit.
I don't think there were exhibits at the last hearing.
I don't believe so.
All right, so why don't we mark Mr. Dean's flash drive as Exhibit A1? And will they have a copy of it? No, I will leave them with that. Okay. And Mr. Titus, this is, what do we call it? What's that entitled? That's,
It's a strike plan with previous layout superimposed. I guess we're going to call this A2.
right.
When is that dated?
November 2nd.
So it's current.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So what this is showing, when we came in for Miller's Ale House, we had a loading area in the back of the building, which is on the west side of the Sky Zone building. And it was set up for rolling doors, and there were 2 loading spaces in there. And the tenant didn't need that for a Sky Zone because it doesn't have any loading. There's no loading for that type of a use. So we met with somebody in the engineering department, and we agreed that we could alter the striping in the back, and there's a small roll-up door in the back, and we left enough room so a truck could park or back up to that door if it ever needed to happen. And then we just created a few extra spaces along the side of that building.
Are there extra spaces that are those shown in what's like orange?
Those are shown in orange. That's what's there now, is in orange. The blue is what was originally proposed in the middle when we went to Miller's Ale House. Then as we continue around, there was some curbing that was proposed along the building, and that was changed to just a striped island, and an additional space was created along there, which just an open area and striped out where nobody could park. When we came in for 24-hour fitness, we wanted a cross through between the 2 properties. So we created that cross through and eliminated maybe 3 spaces along there. When we came in for 24-hour fitness, a lot of the discussion was about the amount of parking there. We saw an opportunity to create more parking between the lot on Building 7 and 24-hour fitness. This was originally a 24-foot driveway through here. There was going to be no parking along the northerly side of Sky Zone.
Okay, I just want to have you.
So there was no parking at all along here, and we created 20 spaces along the building and kind of joined it up with 22 spaces behind Kinko's or Lot 7 that's in the back and is underutilized. Very few people ever park there, maybe a few employees once in a while. So it opened this up, and there's 42 spaces in there that we're proposing as shared parking between the two buildings. So we eliminated 2 curb lines. There was a curb line to the north of Sky Zone, and there was a curb line to the south of Kinko's, and between the 2 curb lines, there was just going to be some plantings in there. So that kind of created 42 spaces that weren't there before that could be used by 24-hour fitness, Sky Zone, or the restaurants. I'm going to turn this over.
A2 consists of 2 sides.
No,
The first, or you want to mark this as A3?
we could do that. Let's mark it to 3. A3 is both sites together. It shows the 24-hour fitness site to the west, and it shows the Sky Zone Krispy Kreme Lot 7 to the east. And this shows all the parking for 24-hour fitness and how it would interact with this site. We do have a crosswalk between 24-hour fitness to the parking behind Lot 7 or Kinko's, and that was proposed on the original site plan, and it was discussed at the meeting that people from 24-hour fitness would be able to utilize this parking as additional overflow parking for 24-hour fitness. There's also a sidewalk between the cross-through between 24-hour fitness and the Sky Zone building. There's a crosswalk so pedestrian traffic can get between the buildings. So this is an area that's set up as overflow parking for 24-hour fitness, but there's also overflow parking for Sky Zone and Krispy Kreme.
So how many parking spaces between the 3 properties?
There's 231 on site on the Krispy Kreme Sky Zone site. There's 133 on Lot 6, which is the 24-hour fitness site, and then there's 42 shared parking spaces in the area between Lot 7 and
There's like 408 spots altogether from our arithmetic. It's fairly decent. Is that about right?
that's about right.
What you have is 3 properties working harmoniously together.
Correction, I think
They
you're
meet-
now
they-
using 7, so say 4.
Pardon?
You're trying to use 7 as well, Kinko's, so we'll say 4 at this
3
point,
properties. There's Lot 6,
right?
7, and Lot 8.
And then Krispy Kreme is where,
That's all one lot.
this is all one lot, with 2 principal uses.
Yes.
Okay. So 3, okay.
3
Yeah,
properties.
but realistically, a good amount of those spots are worthless for someone going to Krispy Kreme or Moe's or whatever's gonna be there. I mean, most people probably won't walk
When we were discussing
a half a mile to go get a donut like that.
We were talking about a crosswalk between this area and maybe this side of the parking area, so somebody would use that.
What is the total deficit between all the properties? If you were to add up what was supposed to be, what is the deficit?
I can give you a quick calculation from what they just provided. As far as the deficit of all the spaces that exist on the 3 properties, and what's required pursuant to what's existing on the site. There are 401 spaces on all three properties, 231 on Lot 8, 133 on Lot 6, 37 on Lot 7, unless there's spaces in the front that I'm not counting, but 37. That's 401 spaces. Alone for Lot 8, 336 spaces are necessary. So there's 64 additional spaces for a 24-hour fitness and the retail building that has the Kinko's store in it. It sounds like there's a deficiency greater than what's being provided there. And I also wanted to address one other thing, because Mr. Schnitzer did send me the parking agreement, but the parking agreement only covers Lot 6 and Lot 8. There's no parking agreement, and I don't know if it's because it's proposed as part of this application, but the parking agreement only encumbers Lot 6 and Lot 8. Lot 7 is only included as part of a pass-through, an access agreement to get between the two sites. When you read through the parking agreement and then you look at the Exhibit C as part of the parking agreement, it shows how many spaces are shared between Lot 6 and Lot 8, the subject property. 240 spaces are shown, including all the spaces on Lot 6 and 93 spaces, including the shared parking, that the 42 spaces that they found, those are already encumbered by a shared parking agreement with Lot 6. So they would be sharing at least the 20 spaces on Lot 8 with Lot 6, Lot 8, and Lot 7.
Sounds like quite a deficiency.
The other thing about the easement is that it says, no such change or modification shall extinguish, modify, block, or reduce the number of parking stalls to 240 within the protected area, which is what I just described. And I don't know if they're modifying those 240 spaces. It appears that they are, and so I don't know if that easement needs to be extinguished and then changed.
In the first resolution, 244 spots were proposed. The combined parcels, you said, would require 402. 244 were proposed, and that was agreed upon in the resolution, I believe, at that time.
Yeah, I think that's also because the uses were significantly different than the uses that are actually present and will be possibly occupying the buildings.
Well, we know that, I think that the testimony was for 24-hour fitness, that they basically heard most uses early in the morning or late at night. And during the day, I didn't think they had that much use, but they wanted to make sure that they had some shared parking in case there was an overflow.
Yeah, but, you have Sky Zone in there now. It was a proposed Burlington Coat Factory. I don't think that the traffic for the Burlington Coat Factory was anticipated to be anywhere near the traffic that the Fun Center is presenting. Obviously, the Kiddie Academy isn't doing a whole lot there, but you've got completely different uses, and based on the uses, parking becomes troublesome.
But proof was shown by the parking as shown by Mr. Dean.
We're looking at something that isn't telling a true picture, though, because the other tenants aren't there. So we really have no idea. So it's important for us to make a decision, which is a sound decision for the safety of the people utilizing that facility. And right now, I mean, of course, based on what he's shown with the drones, yes, it seems like it's fine. But when you open up the other 3 or 4 stores, the potential becomes more problematic for us looking at it and trying to distinguish whether the parking is truly adequate or truly inadequate. And although you may have some shared lots, you're not going to walk 200-300 yards in this weather to go buy a donut, you're gonna go someplace else. People aren't gonna do it if there's a ton of parking. So I don't know if those parking spots are really beneficial to the cause here.
Well,
And you're still deficient in a lot of spots.
Mr. Chairman, I thought it would be helpful to, and my review memo included, the deficiencies that were granted in the past. And my commentary here and what I previously said is no way talking about the deficiencies and what they represent. I'm going to wait for the planner to provide proofs about that. But I do think it's important that it's laid out to show the variances that were provided before. So in the original resolution from 2014 granting the first approval for the 13,500 square foot building at the front and preserving the back piece, 398 spaces were required, 244 were proposed, and a variance was granted for a deficiency of 154 spaces. This is for Lot 8 alone. In October 2015, an additional 2 spaces were proposed, and so which brought it to 246 spaces. However, the total required parking increased to 425 spaces based on the new building that was proposed, and so the deficiency was increased to 179 spaces, and that variance was granted. The 2016 approval, which was eventually vacated, required 425 spaces still. They increased their parking provided to 251 spaces, so they added another 5 spaces, and so the deficiency was decreased to 174. But essentially the approval that they reverted to as of 2017, they went back to October 2015, and so the variance basically was 246 spaces, whereas 425 were required. And currently, what's being proposed, as I calculated it based on the existing conditions and the proposed tenants, would be a requirement of 336 parking spaces, whereas that gets confusing, but approximately 273, including their shared parking arrangement, is what's proposed. And so that's a deficiency of 63 spaces. Now, the parking, as we just described, the shared parking may reduce that number and increase the deficiency.
Say that again, please. The last part. No,
The shared parking, because as I described, it's already encumbered by a different agreement for a different lot. Potentially about 20 spaces might not be able, or 20, whatever it is, might not be able to be counted, I suppose.
Okay, so you're looking at an 83 spot.
Let's say 83 at most, 83
So
to 85.
we have originally approved 100 and how many spot?
179.
So we've cut it in half. It's cut in half.
Essentially, yeah.
Efficiency is cut in half.
I present, does anybody have any other questions for Mr. Titus at this time?
Now, does anybody from the audience have a question of the chair? Okay.
Oh, and I just wanted to make a note that change in the requirement was largely because the restaurant was about almost over 2 times the size of the restaurants. The number of seats was about over 2 times the amount of seats that are being proposed as these multi-tenants are. And so the parking requirement did decrease because, as a result of that.
I understand, for Krispy Kreme, I understand most of that whole property is vacant.
They do make their own donuts.
Can we just talk into the microphones so we have a record? I know we have.
At this time, I'd like to call Justin Orsiello. Justin Orsiello, who is our planner, and I would ask that he be sworn in at this time.
If you could just come to the microphone or grab that microphone.
Can I sit? I hurt my knee.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and your address.
Sure, it's Justin Auciello, Auciello. The address is 125 Half Mile Road, Suite 200, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701. It's Capone Consulting.
Mr. Orsiello, are you a licensed planner of the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I've been licensed since 2007, and my license is current.
And would you tell the board a little bit about your experience where you've appeared and testified as a licensed planner?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a master's degree in city regional planning from Rutgers University, 2005. I've been practicing planning since then. As I previously said, I've been licensed since 2007. I've appeared in 19 of the state's 21 counties. I've appeared on hundreds of occasions on a variety of matters. I'm also, in my career, I've been involved with master planning, with you know, the whole kind of gamut of planning, from master planning to redevelopments. I worked on a variety of similar applications for this one. I also teach land use at Rutgers University, and that pretty much sums it up.
I ask that the board accept Mr. Ausiello's
We
credentials.
can accept.
Thank you.
Mr. Ausiello, you're familiar with this application?
Yes, I am.
And could you describe the application and the proposal?
Yes, certainly. So we're here tonight for the amended preliminary and final major site plan for the additional use variance relief to permit a fast food restaurant with drive-through at this location, block 3801, lot 8. The previous witnesses have given a good lay of the land, so I can get right into the planning proofs for this matter. So of course, we do require a D1 use variance for the proposed fast food restaurant with the drive-through. And as the board is aware, there are certain proofs that must be put in the record for a use variance. Being that this is a D1 use variance, we apply the requirements of the Beachy case, which provides for certain elements. The first being the particular suitability. What is it about this site that makes it suitable for this use? Secondly, it's the special reasons, whether or not this proposal advances any of the purposes of the MOUL, municipal land use law. Thirdly, it's the negative criteria. It's a showing of whether or not the use will present, or the proposal will present a substantial detriment to public good. Also, whether or not there will be any substantial impairment to the zone plan or the zoning ordinance. And then finally, it's the enhanced quality of proof, which speaks to the omission from the use from the zoning. So starting with the particular suitability, certainly I think this use is suited. Now granted, the underlying zone, the HD zone, does not permit this use. Of course, this is why we're here for the use variance. The HD zone, I'm sorry, the HC zone, excuse me, HC zone does permit restaurants as a conditional use. So even though we are not within the strict letter of the law with respect to a restaurant, in my opinion, a fast food use is quite similar to a restaurant use, which is permitted as a conditional use subject to certain standards. So I think when we're looking at the overall zone, I think this is a use, even though it is not permitted directly, is quite consistent with the type of use which is permitted as conditional use. When we're looking at the particular suitability, it speaks to what makes this site suited for this use. I think number one, we are located along the Route 22 corridor. This is the precise location, this corridor, the precise location where you can see a use which is auto-dependent. Also, in the HC zone, even though the ordinance does not permit fast food anywhere in any zone, there are a variety of fast food restaurants that are all within 2,000 feet of this site. And that's, I'll just name four: Chipotle, Saporito Pizza, and I hope I didn't butcher that, Five Guys, and 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven is not a fast food use per se, but it does have certain characteristics that are similar to a fast food use. Also, you heard previous testimony from our traffic engineer and the site engineer relative to the layout of the site, and the arrangement of the site, and I think that also makes this site particularly suited for this use. And lastly, this site has already received approval for a restaurant with a drive-through. So I think, with all of those.
Excuse me, it was a restaurant with a pickup window, not a drive-through.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm wrong, and you're right, Mr. Chair. With a pickup window. So even though there was a prior approval, I think even though there is a distinction between a drive-through and a pickup window, I think the overall usage of what's going on in the building is fairly consistent with that prior approval. So that's the particular suitability. Getting into the special reasons, I do believe that we do advance multiple purposes of zoning in the municipal land use law. It's my opinion that we advance criteria G, provide for sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of uses. In this instance, it's commercial. Criteria I, to advance a visual environment that is fitting and suitable and desirable. And H, which is to advance the free flow of traffic. I believe it's important to state here that in the master plan reexamination, there is a statement in the land use goals. This is going back to the 2005 master plan. Goal number 3 is to take advantage of redevelopment opportunities along the Route 22 corridor as new uses are proposed for the underutilized sites. I think this is an application in front of the board which certainly fits in line with that goal. This is a site that has been redeveloped. It's in the process of seeing tenants come online. So I think what's proposed tonight and the overall layout of the site is conducive to advancing that purpose of the master plan. With respect to the negative criteria for this use variance, I certainly don't see any substantial negative detriment to the public good in this application. As I had previously said, the board had previously approved a similar but different application for a fast food restaurant with a pickup window. From the planning perspective, I don't see anything radically different that would impair an impact that would rise to a level of being substantial with this proposed use. With respect to the impact, whether or not there's an impact to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance, we are in the HC zone. This is a zone that already envisions this type of use and other uses of similar intensity. And I certainly don't, even though we do deviate from the requirements, given that this is a fast food restaurant, I don't believe what's being proposed rises to a level of fracturing the zone plan to essentially shattering the overall purpose of the zone plan, because I do feel, in my professional opinion, this is analogous to a restaurant, given obviously the distinction that there's a drive-through window that's proposed, which makes it different. But overall, in the kind of the grand scheme of this building and the overall site, I think this is a use that's consistent with the overall site and certainly with the overall intent and purpose of the HC zone. That concludes the use variance testimony. We also do require a C variance, a bulk variance, for the parking deficit. And you just heard from your engineer, she went through the planner, went through the approvals dating back to 2014, 2015, and the vacated 2016 approval. and your planner went through the numbers and also found that as proposed tonight, we are cutting the deficit, which I believe, if my notes are correct, which was about 83 at most, and please correct me if I'm wrong. But we are currently cutting that in half. So I think even though we do require a variance for the parking, I believe that the applicant has made efforts in working with the board and the board's professionals over the course of the years to attempt to reduce that deficit and also make it more amenable to overall circulation, flow, and function of the property. So I think from the perspective of being a C variance, I think the benefits of granting that variance do outweigh the detriments. And I believe that this site will be able to function. You heard testimony from Mr. Dean. He's willing to work with the board professionals to find a solution that is going to accommodate the site and to ensure proper flow and parking arrangements.
You didn't mention that the approval for Dunkin' Donuts, which I think is in close proximity to this property that's in the center island, that also has a drive-through lane also, doesn't it?
Correct, that's correct. So we are consistent with a neighboring use that has the same usage that's proposed tonight.
I have no further questions.
Anybody on the board have any questions? Professionals have any questions?
Not in particular to this witness testimony, but this application, this is a point, now includes lot 7. Is that what the applicant is proposing?
No, it doesn't include. Lot 7 is an aside, it's a row, it's something that's controlled by Mr. Gagliotti that doesn't require any agreements with anybody. It has the parking, essentially where the parking has always been on.
Well, that's my point. Thank you. The point is the parking, as opposed to the 2015 and 2014 approvals, the parking on lot 7, particularly right in that view, right there, the stalls to the east on the lower of the portion of the screen were not in that location during the prior approval. And what I mean by that is that curb line was wholly within lot 7. As proposed, that curb line and those parking stalls, as shown, straddle the lot line between lot 7 and lot 8.
The ones to the right.
The ones on the bottom of Kinko.
You're talking about right at the base of the TV screen?
Yeah.
Yes, right, okay.
What happened is these parking spaces along the southerly side of lot 7 got shifted northerly a little bit, and the aisle between the.
I'm not talking about those, to the
No,
east.
he's talking about when you
To the
had the
east.
issue with DOT.
To the
and
east
how the-
between lot 7 and lot 8.
No, the other side of the
Down
building.
Between the
And lot 8.
Right.
Right there, those spaces.
Those, prior to this presentation of this, coming to this board in 2019, those stalls, as shown on the prior plans, were wholly on lot 7. Now, as shown, as built today, and as shown on your plan, they straddle the property
Yes,
line.
I agree they do.
So isn't this application now, lot 7, included in this application? Also, with that, since those parking stalls have been moved, and we are talking about them as shared parking, I wanted to get some testimony on the dimensional, particularly the aisle. The aisle looks to be non-standard, the aisle width.
Between the two spaces.
Between the rear of the parking stall and the building on lot 7, the Kinko's. I scale, from your plan that you submitted for this application, just a few of them are on the corner. The southeast corner, the rear corner of Kinko's, I scale about just over 10 foot aisle width.
Where the arrow is, where the white arrow is you're talking about?
You should look at the picture.
Yeah, right where the white arrow is, correct.
On the video, the
On the
white
video.
arrow in the back of the building on the video.
So can you provide some testimony on the aisle widths and around, right where the white arrows are? Just so the board
Back of
understands what the aisle
Kinko's,
widths are.
right there, where you were just pointing. Right there.
It looks to be about 10 feet.
Well, I just want the board to understand that it's a non-standard aisle width.
How deficient is it?
At an angle parking anywhere between 15 and 18 feet, and I'm not sure what the code is right in front of me, but it would be less than 20 typically. I
Where the
think,
white
18
arrow is, with the
foot.
two white cars on the top.
And it's really only occurring at that pinch point at the corner of the building. As you move toward the frontage, it gets wider, obviously.
Those two white cars.
Right at the corner, right by the, I see where you're talking.
The arrow, the white arrow.
Yeah, in
No,
that
the other
corner.
side of the cars.
Closer,
Other side,
closer to the
Kinko's
building.
Right where the shadow line, yeah, right.
That white arrow, right there,
Right
there.
Those spots, how do you back out of those spots?
When was the angled parking tripe? When was that? When?
I don't know. It's not wasn't part of the prior approval, and that's part of the reason why we're here.
Mr. Daniati just took advantage of that space and put a wall there and created those spaces over there. That's what happened. It wasn't designed, it wasn't asked for or anything, and I'm not including those in any of the numbers that I have calculated.
Isn't that your shared parking count of 42 spaces?
No, those 42 parking spaces.
Are the behind
22
spaces.
behind Kinko's.
Okay.
And the 20
Okay.
are perpendicular to, and those 42 spaces, those are included in that alley that I have, and neither are the spaces in the front of lot 7. And there's no way that any of those are standard on that site in the front.
Just wanted to be clear.
But that's not what I'm including in the numbers that I'm putting in the shared parking arrangement. That's kind of just like additional parking for lot 7.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a recommendation. I understand that Mr. Gagliotti has common ownership, and so that the parking can flow, but at any point in the future, he may not be the owner of either property. And so I would just rely upon the parking that's provided on site rather than enter into a new parking agreement that would ultimately have to share the parking between the two sites anyway. So you're gaining 22 spaces of use, but I think ultimately you'd have to codify it in an easement or something like that to make it true. I instead of involving lot 7 and as I described, the convoluted parking agreement that already exists with another site, I would rather just not include another shared parking agreement.
So the ones to the left you're fine with, it's the ones to the right closest to.
The ones to the left are located on lot 8.
Yes.
The ones next to Sky Zone. The ones to the right on the screen over there are on lot 7. Yes.
And just for a point of reference, the shadow line on the Sky Zone building is roughly the property line between lot 7 and lot 8.
Okay.
So the aisle straddles both lots, and there would need to be
Yeah.
a shared, a cross-access agreement for the use of the drive aisles.
And that drive aisle is also encumbered as part of an access agreement as the parking arrangement with lot 6 with 24-hour fitness.
So what do you want to do? Correct. Right?
It would be 251 spaces. So you'd basically be removing the 22 spaces that are on lot 7, and you would just rely upon the 251 that are located on lot 8 right now. And so the parking efficiency would be the
83 goes to 105?
It would be about 100.
The 83 was including taking out the shared parking. So it was 63 prior. So you take out you add another. It's 85 now.
Okay.
And
63
the
plus
prior
22.
approval, I think, was 251. The prior
Yes.
approval was. 2015 approval was 251.
2016.
16 was 251.
So, I mean, I counted the parking on the site plan, and I came out to 251 on Lot 8 alone. And so if that is true, then the parking deficiency is therefore 83 spaces. I'm sorry, 85 spaces. Correct.
So these are just here, you know? They're just here, and they serve whoever they serve.
They serve Lot 7 because they're located on Lot 7. If people choose to park there, then they choose to park.
Somebody chooses to park there. Okay.
But can we still ask for them to put up some kind of fencing? Because it's on their property.
Yes, the curb and the island is on Lot 8, this application's property, yeah. It's on the,
Okay.
We'll agree to that. So you'll have the fencing, as I
Wait,
understand
they changed the
it, will be
site plan.
around here.
Yes, I think that's what
How
was
did they do
discussed.
that?
Thank you.
I understand.
We'll agree to do that.
It's a little breezy.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a few comments for the planner's testimony as well. I just want to clarify that the parking variance that's being requested tonight and the reduction in the parking or the reduction in the deficiency is not based on them providing additional parking. It's based on the use requiring less parking.
Right.
And so they're not. I just wanted to make it clear that they're not providing additional parking to mitigate the situation.
No, it's the use that's
It's the use that's
reducing that number,
reducing,
right.
exactly. And I just had a few comments about the testimony for the use variance. While the planner provided that a restaurant is akin to fast food that's contemplated here, the ordinance specifically states that the definition of a restaurant does not include drive-ins or fast food, and so the zoning ordinance did contemplate that a fast food unit use should be treated differently, and so it's not akin to a normal restaurant. And I think the resolution that approved what was then the Miller's Ale House with the pickup window made it explicitly clear. And Mr. Snitzer, in his own words in the resolution, stated that they are not proposing a fast food restaurant of any type. Rather, it would be a regular restaurant with a drive-through pickup window. So not only does the code establish that, but the resolution based on this site in particular also does that as well. It makes it very clear that the prior approval has no bearing on the Krispy Kreme fast food drive-through, whatever that's being proposed tonight. And I just wanted to make that also clear.
Thank you.
And my other questions or statements to the planner would be, the master plan that you referenced, talking about new uses in the highway commercial zone, talking about redevelopment, does it contemplate additional fast food restaurants? Does it recommend additional fast food restaurants in the zone?
I just say there's two comments. In the resolution authorizing the Dunkin' Donuts operation, it was clearly stated that one of the reasons it was being given is because the master plan wanted these opportunities for redevelopment along the HC corridor, and that was in that resolution. And I believe Mr. Osceola's comment about the fast food and restaurant is akin to a comment a judge made in a particular case, and I don't, and if I may ask Mr. Osceola if he has mention of that case.
Sure, yeah, so this is a case, it's Saddlebrook Realty versus Saddlebrook Zoning Board. In that case, the Zoning Board of Adjustment in Saddlebrook granted a use variance for a fast food restaurant, a Wendy's, where fast food was a prohibited use. In the appeal, the judge made a finding that, quote, there is no substantial distinction between the proposed Wendy's restaurant and a traditional restaurant, end quote. So that was, my point, and I wasn't clear during my testimony, but I was citing that case.
All right, so that's the only reason he brought that in, is because it was cited by the court, an appellate division court, I believe.
That's correct.
So,
Thank you for stating the case law. Do you know if that Wendy's included a drive-through window?
I don't know, but I can look it up real fast and maybe we can.
I think that it has some bearing because a fast food restaurant and a restaurant with could be the same. They both serve food. They don't have a drive-through, but this one, I mean, the zoning code in Springfield also does prohibit drive-ins as well as fast food. It distinguishes between fast food and drive-ins. So I just wanted to ask for some clarity there.
Right. That's, is that based?
That was my question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for the board's benefit, I would suggest that case law is really not relevant to this application without knowing much more about the factual underpinnings. I would suggest more important is the fact that our zoning ordinance makes a specific distinction between a restaurant and a fast food restaurant. We don't know if that ordinance did. And so I would suggest that, though that's the case law in that case,
Right,
it's not necessarily relevant to this matter.
But I know the Dunkin' Donuts across Center Island had drive-through also.
That certainly is
Irrelevant.
a relevant fact.
Yes. Mr. Cangione, have we answered basically any questions you may have had in your...
Yes, you satisfied my report, but again, I just want to make it clear, so you are you're requesting a cross easement for the aisles between lot 7 and 8, and also you have parking proposed over encroaching from lot 7 onto lot 8, right in that picture. So is that the application that you're showing the so clear for the record that that's what would be approved?
Yeah, he's talking about, this is right here.
Those parking spill over on the lot.
And then the aisle between the two buildings on lot 8 and lot 7. This aisle allows the traffic to pass through, circulate.
I want to make clear. That's all I have.
Anybody else have any questions for the planner?
I have no further questions.
Mr. Chairman, I think at the present time, that's my case. Presented to the board. I would ask the board consider it favorably. There have been precedents established allowing this type of operation in other parts of the HC zone. What you have here is a new type of operation with brand-new buildings that replace the old Colonial Hotel and some old office buildings that were outdated. And I think you have a very nice development on this site, and I would ask the board to approve it as presented.
Just for the record, I don't know if I asked if anybody had any questions of the planner from the public, so if anybody does, fine, make sure we cover that. You know, personally, I don't have any issue with the actual drive-through at this point. My concern is just about the parking and that when the other restaurants open up. That's definitely something that we don't know about. It's an uncertainty at this point. I think Mr. Gagliardi's decision to make employees of the property, of the tenants rather, park in designated areas so that it frees up spots is, I think that is a positive thing. The railing, for safety's sake, I think is a good thing. Any other comments?
Just like, before we discuss about including a placard regarding parking on the side of the building there.
Yes, I thought we said we would add
Yeah,
sort of sign that additional Sky Zone parking, parallel, however you want to, maybe the engineer, you want to discuss that with the engineer to see the basic type of sign? However it works,
We can propose something and with the intent of directional way wayfinding signage.
Okay, you'll take a look at it and approve it.
Jamie, how do you feel about the,
I would also
parking
maybe put a
issues?
sign there, employee parking in rear,
How do you feel about the parking issues?
something like that, so they know to go. What, I know you're gonna tell the tenants that, but I would still probably put a sign up
Employee
there.
parking and
in
additional
rear.
parking for Sky Zone in the rear or something like that.
Well, no, I wouldn't say additional parking for Sky Zone in the rear.
Just
They're not
additional
gonna park back there.
Okay.
And adding parking in the stripe zone along the back of the
Oh,
building.
yeah, some,
adjacent to the,
parallel spots where you're gonna take away
Where
the
the, where the
drive.
lane is, yeah, 3 spots. Also, I'd like to say to the board, I mean, you know, this project was kind of thrown in my lap. My dad is very ill, and I'm trying to get it rectified and straightened out. I'm willing to do whatever you guys and ladies and gentlemen want us to do on the site, as far as putting in landscaping, as far as putting in the fence and the crosswalk, whatever signage we need. I mean, I'll work with the engineer. We don't have a problem doing that. We just want to get the site up and running and corrected. Thank you.
Right, right, okay. Well, yeah, either way, take care of that. I just don't want to, you know, the 83, so 127. This is first thing in the morning. Any other comments from the board?
We're good.
Good. Professionals, any other comments? All right. I need a little assistance because there's a lot of moving parts, changes, and so forth that are coming into this. But I think we can offer an approval for application 2013-19, Pop Realty Corp., 25 Route 22 East, Block 3801, Lot 8, for an amended site plan use variance with a drive-through with the following stipulations. I think, go ahead.
Here's what I have. There will, in the area between the two buildings, a fence, there will be curbing to close off the hatched area. A decorative fence will be put from front to rear to ensure that pedestrians cannot cross. And there will be a crosswalk approximately at the southwest corner of the building across the driveway to direct pedestrians to that spot. There'll be a sign placed on, a directional sign placed on Sky Zone indicating, the northeast corner of Sky Zone indicating that there is additional parking at that point. Employee parking will be established at the back of the Sky Zone building with new striping and signage. And the approval of the application is subject to no change in the currently proposed tenants.
The back of the Krispy Kreme building will have three parallel spots, I think we said.
Yes.
As opposed to the pull-in spots.
Right, three parallel spots.
Right.
Where the current spots are, and driveway.
Alongside the drive-through
Driveway will be
lane,
moved
right.
closer to the building.
Right.
Yep.
Lot 7's parking lot has nothing to do with Lot 8, So those 22 spots, they're there, but they're not part of the application. What else?
There needs to be an access agreement for the drive aisle that's shared between 7 and 8.
Okay,
So an access agreement needs to be executed.
okay. What else? do we-
No,
Not a shared parking. Right now, if you look at the screen right now, to the left side, the parking along the Sky Zone building on Lot 8 and the parking on the rear of Lot 7, the drive aisle between the two is currently split in half by each of the lot lines. The lot line's not shown on that plan. But essentially, to use that drive aisle, you have to be on a portion of Lot 7 and a portion of Lot 8. And so as Mr. Cangiano had, I think, reiterated a few times, we would like to see an access agreement that would show that, cross-access agreement.
it would be an access agreement between possibility.
It's okay, we're gonna,
As long as it's
we're gonna do it.
memorialized on the,
As long as it's, as long as there's a document and it's memorialized, that's fine. Anything else? Are we missing?
And to that same acknowledgement that the parking from lot 7 encroaches onto lot 8.
Right.
Acknowledgement that there's.
The 22 spots.
no,
Is that-
no,
No, the ones,
right
the ones at the bottom, on the TV monitor, the ones at the bottom, right, okay. Right, that's where the fence, that's where the decorative fence is gonna run all the way along, and then the crosswalk will be put in.
Just one other thing, I know you're saying decorative fence, we use decorative fence, we're allowed to put landscape in there also?
Yeah, absolutely,
some way though,
absolutely.
so people don't walk through.
Yeah,
Because they'll walk through bushes if there's a way to get through.
yeah, I mean, they'll just destroy it for crying out loud.
Can we get a stop sign there?
Where?
There is one showing, I know where you're talking, there's supposed to be a stop bar painted there,
Something,
and a stop sign.
yes.
Yes.
Because all I see is, I'm seeing huge safety concerns, especially with the deficiency in parking. I just see a lot of people driving around to find spots, and that's my biggest concern.
And that'll be,
So, right there, so as a condition, yes,
By the crosswalk that you're gonna put up, put a stop sign,
Yeah.
yes.
yes.
and it's, I think it's proposed on the plans that you have.
I thought so, that there was, but I don't, yeah. I just want to make sure.
They just haven't finished the paving and the painting and all that kind of stuff, but that is shown on the plan there.
And that'll be before the pedestrian crosswalk.
Yes.
Right.
There are a lot of different signage, things that we have to put in there, because we're waiting to see how we're gonna pave, move a couple spots around and stuff like that, so once we get there, we gotta look at Gary Neal and put the whole thing together.
Have we done it our I's and crossed our T's?
Believe so.
Okay. So, with all that being said, is there a motion to approve the application?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a roll call.
Vice Chair Roth?
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham?
Yes.
Mr. Hochstein?
Yes.
Ms. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
And Chairman Fonseca?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Jen? Yeah. I'd like to ask for an adjournment.
I so move.
Oh, right.
A motion to adjourn.
I move.
All in favor?
Aye.